Hi, this is Dr. Bosch, and I thought we'd just take some time to talk some more about the research presentation. I know that's going to be coming up before you know it toward the end of the semester. But just to go over some main points, I've had a few questions on email about it. So let me explain a few things. So let's look at the description of it, and you can find this in Canvas, of course. But right from the start, the presentation has to go well beyond what's presented in your textbook. In other words, you want to know this topic really well. You want to research it. You want to find out about it in different ways so you really understand both the system that you're studying, the anatomy that you're studying, the physiology that you're studying, and of course the homeostatic imbalance itself. So I'd like to say that right away, that your presentation should reflect a deep understanding of this. Now, it has to be on PowerPoint. That's really the only system that works well on Canvas. So if you've used other presentation methods, that's fine, but not for this assignment. And you can get PowerPoint, if you don't have it on your computer, you can get it for free by being a South Mountain student, and that's shown up here. So what should be on your presentation? Well, first, let me say you don't have to speak this. This is only meant to be something you're looking at. If we were in class, you would give this presentation, but for now, you're kind of making believe that you're giving it by producing a PowerPoint. You need to have references, at least 4 journal articles or books. It can be a combination of those. At least 4 of the reliable sources. And be sure they're reliable. That means government agencies, hospitals, universities, that sort of thing. And then when you turn it in, you'll turn in the PowerPoint. You'll submit that. You'll turn in a self-review, and I'll show you that in a minute. That shows that you've gone through and checked your presentation. And you'll be turning in a reference sheet. So again, this is all online, but you do have to have a reference sheet that has at least these 8 sources. Many people use many more than that, but 8's the minimum. And be sure they're an APA style. So that's the same style we've been using in class for the current event article reviews, and whenever I give you material that has references, it's APA style. Okay, so 3 things you have to turn in the day that the presentation is due: the presentation, the self-review, and the references. Now, just a quick note, the references have to be on the PowerPoint as well. That's like the last slide or so. And you have to do your sources using APA, but I'd like you to have a separate slide showing where you got your pictures, and that can just be websites. So that's just cut and paste all the websites that you use for your pictures and diagrams. Okay. All right. So how does this look? How's your presentation look? You start out by talking about your interest in the topic. So if you're working alone, just what you're interested in and why you're doing this topic. If there's more than one of you, there should be a separate statement from each person who's doing the presentation about why they're interested. Then this section, so really the next few sections, these are the hard ones. These are the ones that really you can't do without doing research and really understanding things well. So you start out by talking about the normal anatomy of the system. So if you're doing reproductive system, you talk about the normal anatomy, especially the anatomy related to what you're going to be talking about. So what that means, if you're doing something in the female reproductive tract, you would want to go through the entire female reproductive tract in detail, the anatomy, what are the structures. Then you go on and talk about what is different when there's the disorder. Again, focusing on anatomy. And you won't find this by Googling it. That's why I say these things on this page, these are the things that really separate out strong presentations from weak ones. that you took the time to really understand the anatomy well. What should it be like? And then what's it like when there is this disorder, this disease that you're studying? And you should have at least one slide that actually compares them directly. And you should really have good detail of anatomy. So this is huge. Then separate from that is physiology. Sometimes students put anatomy and physiology together and they lose all the points. Because really, this, just like in your essays on the exams, you need to know that structure is different than function. So we want to, now they do go together. It's not like you can't say something about anatomy. You almost have to in physiology. It's not like you can't say something about physiology here. You almost have to at times. But the focus here has to be on anatomy, okay? And then the second part has to be physiology. These two parts are the heart of your presentation. So you talk about normal physiology. How should, again, if you're talking something about the female reproductive tract, how should that work? What are the functions of these structures you talked about? How should they work if everything's going fine? Then talk about how is it different if they have the disorder? What doesn't work? Right up here, you said how the structures have changed when there's a disorder. Here, talking about how does the function change? And again, at least one slide. A lot of times people do 2 or 3, where you're really directly comparing normal physiology to the physiology to homeostatic imbalance. So these sections, normal anatomy, anatomy of disorder, normal physiology, physiology of disorder, this is the heart of your presentation. So it's 40 points, but this really counts very largely for another section down here that says overall knowledge, so 30 points. So really 70 points of your 120 come from these areas: knowing anatomy, knowing physiology, and knowing how they're different. The other sections, you'll notice the points go down quite a bit because these are very easy to find. If you told me the disease you're studying, I could probably Google this and within 45 seconds have a pretty good description of the diagnosis. But you do, again, want to talk about the diagnosis. And if it's hard to diagnose, then write that. Say, we don't have a great diagnosis, but this is what's done. Okay, and that's really true for all of these. Sometimes we really don't know the cause. That's the next section. Or the risk factors. Why does someone get this disease? But you do have to discuss this and say what is known. So how do we normally diagnose this disorder? What do we think the causes are? If we're not sure, again, what's the best information right now? What are the risk factors? Do certain behaviors affect whether you get the disease? Does it matter your age or race or gender? And then again, if the cause is not known, what do people suspect? You won't find that people just throw up their hands and say, we have no idea. There'll be ideas about the cause and diagnosis. Then systems affected. This is one that students miss a lot. Not a lot, but compared to the other ones. Everyone gets diagnosis, everyone gets cause. A system is one of the systems we studied this year. So you wouldn't say bones, you would say the skeletal system. You wouldn't say heart, you would say it affects the cardiovascular system, and this is why. Almost every disease affects the nervous system, so if you're not saying nervous system, look closely, because if it hurts, that's called the nervous system, right? So be sure you look at the systems and call them systems. If you're not sure, look in your textbook. The chapter titles are almost all systems. And don't skip this. Sometimes people, like, again, if you're looking at the woman's reproductive system, they may say, well, it's just a reproductive system. But maybe it affects blood flow, maybe it affects pain, maybe it has a relationship to the endocrine system. In other words, this, again, like the first part on anatomy and physiology, you may Google it and nothing comes up, but you have to study it to the point where you have a really nice description here. Treatment and prevention, that's another gimme. If you told me the disease right now, I could Google that, and in a minute I would have something about treatment, something about prevention. A lot of the hospitals have this kind of stuff. WebMD has this. And so talk about that, treatment and prevention. Now notice the points. Those should guide you. This should be a lot for 20 points. This should be a lot for 20 points. This doesn't have to be so much, 5. This, a little more for cause and systems, 10 each. And then 5 for treatment and prevention. Then I look at the whole presentation and I say, do they really know this material well? Do they really study it? And that's where these 30 points come from, the overall knowledge of the topic. Now, I'll know that by what you put on your slides. There should be a diagram or picture on every single slide, and there should be a nice description. Again, look down here. Points are lost for long, boring, unedited lists. Don't just copy and paste a bunch of lists. That doesn't help anything. You have to look through it and decide what you're going to put in. Make sure you're summarizing information. In other words, you can't write a book. You have to summarize. What's the most important thing I want to talk about? And then you have to put things in your own words. If your presentation looks like nothing but a big cut and paste, then this whole knowledge thing can go down to 0. Because I know you can cut and paste. I don't know if you know it. So try to put that in your own words. And then you do gain points, even extra credit points, for showing this deep understanding, giving your thoughts, little extras like humor, maybe some interviews you saw or did yourself, some relevant quotes, short, helpful videos. Don't put in videos that last 10 minutes. If they last a minute or 30 seconds or even a minute and a half, those are okay to add. And then technical skill. I have to be able to see this, and I'm imagining others watching this. So you should have large enough font. It should be dark so you can see it. You want to have pictures and diagrams basically on every page. Why have a PowerPoint if there's no picture? And then use bullet points. Don't write out paragraphs or sentences, just bullet points. And then again, avoid long lists or readings. Now, if there's more you would say if you were actually giving this presentation, you can submit that separately on a piece of paper. Just say these are my notes I would have used if I was presenting this. Okay. And then the references, be sure that they are in APA style. And again, here's some more stuff about extra credit. And be sure you're not plagiarizing. If something sounds a little funny, I can sometimes just Google that and up comes something else. So make sure that won't happen, that you're using your own words. Okay. So this description is basically all you need to know, but also to help you. There's the same grading sheet I use when I'm looking at your presentation. And so look through this. You do need to put your name on here, the topic, and then fill it out. Answer all these questions and then turn that in with your presentation. And make sure you're being honest with yourself. And also, if you're saying no to any of these, make sure you fix them. I've had people give themselves like 10 points out of 20, but then they turn it in that way. That's not the point of it. The point is for you to get 120 points. So if you're missing anything on here, change your presentation so it's there, right? So this is meant to help you. And this is where your points come from. Really low scores only come from like ignoring all this. I've had people just write about the disease and they get like 20 points out of 120 because they haven't done the system, the cause, the diagnosis, the anatomy. So really follow this exactly. And I would suggest following it in order. People have said, do I have to go in order? Well, if you do it in order, then you're sure of having it. That's the one thing. If you go out of order, I'll try to figure it out. But I would suggest trying to put it in order if you can. Then lastly, be sure that you have your citations on another piece of paper that you submit to Canvas of the references for information. You don't have to give me the diagrams, the websites. That should be on your PowerPoint, but you don't have to turn it as a separate thing. And again, first, last name, first initials, year, the name of the article, and then where it comes from. Great. So enjoy and do contact me if any questions.